Hello and welcome to The Drug Trip. We post weekly trip reports in story format with various substances for entertainment and harm reduction. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, then please do the channel a solid and please subscribe. Also, let us know your experiences and thoughts in the comments below and we may use them in a future video. Enjoy and be safe. I first heard about ketamine about a year ago and thought it sounded fun, but didn't decide to try it until I found out about the clinical studies where it's been shown to treat the cause of depression. And I've always struggled with self-hatred and depression, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I snorted 200 milligrams straight from a pile on the scale dish, which taught me to do it in lines next time. I then lay down on my bed and waited. I remember thinking after about 3 minutes had passed, this is taking a while, and I let my mind wander. This, I think, is why it hit me all at once. I had totally forgot that I'd done a drug. I started to slide backwards, down and to the left diagonally, into the space between my bed and the wall, and into an infinite white space populated by me and a shapeless black figure in the front and to the right of me. I felt like I was floating down and down. I had forgotten that I had a body, and I had mostly forgotten what reality was. After a disappointingly short time in this sizeless, shapeless white space, I was pulled back upwards onto my bed, into my body, and into the arms of my lover, who we shall call Jay. I liked the idea of that, but I couldn't really feel her. After this point, I was basically conscious, but I felt as if the world was in a slow motion, and everything was sort of faded out. Not dark or anything, but nothing felt solid. Then I started talking to Jay. Not unlike a young kid coming out of the dentist's office, having just been knocked out and acting loopy. I vividly remember that when she spoke, I could hear her, and her words sounded completely foreign, but I could still understand and respond to her. When I heard her speak, I could see what looked like a waveform at the bottom of my vision. And when I regained consciousness, I lay in bed for another 15 to 20 minutes, and when I felt I could manage it, I ventured out into my living room. I didn't have full control of my legs yet, so I ended up walking really weirdly. Not like a robot, but more like someone trying to dance walk and failing miserably at it. For a few hours after that, I felt very normal and very at peace. Now it's been a week since I did the K, and since then I've not had a single self-hating depressive episode, and the depressive episodes I've had were much shorter than before. I would venture to say that ketamine actually helped me. It made me value myself more as a person. And to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm 19, a film student, and had moderate experience with marijuana, and have done acid, shrooms and 25I once. I've also struggled with depression and anxiety for most of my adult life, and I had read how ketamine is being tested as a treatment for depression, and had read many interesting stories and articles. My girlfriend at the time, Kat, prepared me a dose of around 200 milligrams, and a smaller one for herself. The idea of the K-hole didn't appeal to her, but she was curious about the drug. This is when I learned a valuable lesson about snorting things. I had never snorted anything before, and so I sucked in the whole 200 milligram pile at once. It felt like a fireball sliding up my nose, spreading all around my face and down the back of my throat. I had made a mental note to remember to make lines next time. I then lay back on my bed and waited for the drug to hit me. I remember thinking, taking probably a little bit longer than I had expected. About 4 or 5 minutes later, I immediately fell into the full force of the drug. The initial onset was like falling asleep, in that I suddenly became almost completely unaware of my surroundings and my own body. It took me a few seconds to remember that I'd just done a drug. What drug? I'm not sure. It starts with, oh yeah, ketamine. As time went on, I began to feel as though I was sliding down and backwards into a space that was underneath my bed, a sizeless space with what seemed to be some sort of barrier to my right. I began to move freely within this space, choosing to try and get to the other side of this barrier. I kept going down and down, and eventually I passed under the barrier and shot up the other side. I then found myself back in my room and slowly noticed that Kat had crawled in the bed next to me and was holding me comfortingly. I remember trying to find my hands and fingers, then moving them and marvelling at how weird it felt. And for lack of a better expression, my fingers were echoing, fading in and out of different positions as I wiggled them. I also remember repeatedly moaning, holy shit, very slowly, as I tried to convey what I was experiencing. In a brief moment of insight, I realised how loud I sounded to myself, and I somehow managed to ask, "I'm not making too much noise, am I?" To which my girlfriend responded, "No, you're barely making any noise." This put me at ease enough to go back to enjoying myself. And this entire time, I had forgotten all my worries. All my troubles were far away and needed no attention from me right now. Absolute bliss. An unknown amount of time later, I felt more or less awake again. I was able to find my limbs without issue, but moving them was a task I found more difficult than I had expected. I tried to sit up and planned to eventually move into the living room. Upon sitting up, I immediately felt nauseous. Knowing that I would never be able to make my way to the toilet in time, I begged my girlfriend for a plastic bag to throw up in. The moment she handed me the bag, I threw up into it effortlessly. And usually when I vomit, it's extremely unpleasant, but I remember thinking it was no more big deal than, say, burping. Kat disposed of the bag and went into the living room. I promised I'd meet her there once I could walk. And something like 5 minutes later, I thought I'd try getting up. I reminded myself of someone in hospital getting up from their bed, slow and uncoordinated. I walked slowly into the living room, the only way I could, which to onlookers would have seemed like some sort of overly exaggerated funny walk. It was the only way I could maintain balance. I sat on the couch next to her, continuing to feel complete bliss in regards to my ongoing problems of that time. This feeling remained for at least a couple of hours, long after I regained full control over my limbs. That night, Kat had left, and I remembered how much K I had felt. I decided to try taking a much smaller dose to see what that was all about. I estimated that I must have around 250 milligrams left, so I eyeballed a pile of roughly 30 to 50 milligrams. I formed the pile into a line and snorted it half in one nostril and half in the other. This time, it was much less eventful than I had expected. I tried watching a TV show on Netflix, but it was simply too hard to focus, and for whatever reason I stood up and walked to the other side of my room, and then I just stood there, perfectly still, for something like 10 minutes. And again, I had no worries, no concerns, and really no desire to move or do anything. I was quite amazed at my ability to stand still for so long, and then I climbed back into my bed and had the best sleep that I had had in months. On the subject of ketamine as a depression treatment, I can safely say that for a few days I did feel freed from my depression and anxiety. However, this was short-lived, as Kat was a primary source for a lot of my anxiety, and she managed to coax an anxiety attack out of me, and then the general feeling of bliss was gone. I have read that ketamine treats these disorders by repairing neural connections in the brain that have been damaged by chronic anxiety. And based on this, my theory is that she gave me enough anxiety in those few days to redo the damage that ketamine had repaired. Of course, I'm no expert on this subject, it's just my theory. In conclusion, it was a fun and truly unique experience. I can definitely see the addiction potential for this drug, as well as the possibility for treating my depression with it. However, if I were going to self-medicate with this stuff, I'd need to be extremely careful not to get too into it, only using it once a week, and only when I thought it would benefit me.